Welcome to the Our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Our World Heritage. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Our World Heritage Initiative Sustainability Team and Athabasca University's Nuxcatawin and the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session, Indigenous Perspectives on Sustainability in Cultural Heritage, Conservation and Management with a focus on World Heritage. My name is Shabnam Inaludelu, and I'm an associate professor and director of the Heritage Resources Management Program at Athabasca University. I'm joined today by my colleagues from Athabasca University's Nuxcatawin, Elder Maria Campbell, Priscilla Campbell, and Ivy Lalonde, and our student Amy Kwalchuk. I'm participating today from Edmonton, Alberta in Western Canada. I live and work on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples, the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and Region 4 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. I honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. Since we're meeting online today, I would also like to acknowledge all the lands and traditional territories that we are reaching out today as we move forward in the spirit of collaboration and conciliation. This is the second session of the Indigenous Forum, which is part of the activities of the sustainability theme of the Our World Heritage, taking place in the month of July. So before we start, I would like to thank the sustainability team, Ege Yildirim, Lucia Pecci, Pamela Duran-Diaz, Leo Vianol Lalage, Stefania Gioa, and also Mike Goodcoop, and Paula, among others, for their continued support and work behind the scenes. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues again at Athabasca University for their contributions and ongoing support as we plan this webinar over the last few months. Maria, Priscilla, Ivy, and Amy, as well as Kate Nine and our interim dean, Manijan Anani. It's been a true team effort. So a little bit about the session today. As a center for ideas and people to come together to work with Indigenous knowledge, Athabasca University's Nuxcatawin works towards inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and methodologies. We acknowledge different worldviews of Indigenous, autochthon, and non-Indigenous peoples and follow the lands of Wakotewin, the relationship between animate and inanimate, respecting the interrelationships of land, culture, language, and the environment. We acknowledge that we come from a community of diversity with diverse worldviews, but we are working together to create a space for inclusion, and in this webinar particularly, inclusion of Indigenous autochthon perspectives in World Heritage discussions and dominant worldviews that has shaped the international approaches to heritage conservation. We hope to bring Indigenous knowledge to front and center in discussions around sustainability and sustainable development, and as part of the established systems within the World Heritage context. For this purpose, we would like to draw on the knowledge of our elders, leaders, and traditional knowledge holders who come from different Indigenous communities in order to have a meaningful dialogue with international participants about the concept of sustainability from an Indigenous perspective. A few housekeeping points. So this session is being recorded and is streamed on YouTube channel and will be available for viewing later on. So please use the Q&A to ask your questions instead of the chat box so we could monitor the questions. And we encourage everyone to use the chat and introduce yourselves. Let us know from which part of the world you're joining us today and if you are from an Indigenous or autochthon community. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Elder Maria Campbell to everyone. Maria Campbell is the elder in residence at Athabasca University. At Nuxkahtawi, which is meeting place in Cree language, formerly the Center for World Indigenous Knowledge and Research. A writer, playwright, filmmaker, and educator, Maria is one of Canada's most influential Aboriginal artists. Through works such as her autobiography, Half-Breed, and Flight, the first all-Aboriginal theater production in Canada, she has played a seminal role in documenting the daily experience and oral history of contemporary Aboriginal peoples, notably the Métis. Her daring and candid style has helped sensitize the Canadian public to many social issues relating to our Aboriginal communities. A dynamic lecturer, she continues to promote awareness and understanding between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples around the world. So, Maria, I invite you to open the session with your remarks and prayers, please.
Priscilla has just offered me the tobacco and the ribbons, which is the traditional offering that we use at our center. And I welcome all of you in my language, which is Cree. My granny used to always.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, William. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to get started with a prayer here, and I'll just invite you to mute yourself while we get started. I know it's hard to see what's going on when you're on your phone.
Thank you. In my language, which is Cree, my grandmother would always tell people when they came to our door, "Danse, tawao tawao pepitaweg, miugi sagaoma, ego miuk matsu anaps asamina eawigwea tepechegeo," which means welcome, there's room, and we have a beautiful day, and the mystery, who is the ruler of all of us, has given us or lent us a good life. And so I want to share that with you. It is a beautiful day today, and it's wonderful to see all of you and to hear all of those beautiful languages. I'm always reminded, and I think of that when we're talking about sacred sites today. My grandmother taking me out as a little girl, and I was I came home from school and I was very upset at something that had happened. And she took me for a walk and we were in a little meadow and there were flowers and different kinds of plants all blooming. It was the month of June, I think, just before school ended. And she told me, look at them. She said, she said, look at all of them living together, in this place. Each one of them is beautiful. Each one of them has a particular medicine and a particular gift for all of us so that we can live a good life. The trees are there. There's birch, there's poplar, there's willow, there's evergreens, and there's brown-eyed Susans, there's tiger lilies, there's yarrow, there's all kinds of medicines. And she said they all live together in this place, and they give us good health, they give us a good life, and they keep our place and our lives balanced. And I think about that when I think of sacred sites and historic sites, and the importance of protecting them and the inclusion of especially Indigenous people, because we've always been in the past left out of those things. Protecting our lands, the sustainability of our lands, our water, our culture, our language, all of those things are the inheritance that we leave our children. And when we look at our land today, there are people here from all over. And so I'm reminded about that diversity, not just diversity for us as Indigenous people, but also all of the people who have come to our land. And the importance of us protecting those sites for those children who, for us, and especially for grandmothers, great-grandmothers like myself, who have lodges that are grandmother lodges, that those are the things for us to always remind people that everything around us is the inheritance of those children, of our babies, and for 7 generations ahead, and to always ask for help from 7 generations back to be able to do that in a good way, and to protect those things so that our people can stay strong and that our lands can be strong, so that there's always balance in our earth. And so I'd like us to think about that as we begin our conversation, that we put all of our babies in the center of the circle, and that we speak about the importance of protecting these sites, not just protecting them, but how do we keep them alive? It's not that they die, but in those being close to us, or in us moving away from them, where we kill something for ourselves, not just for our children, but also for ourselves. And in this day and age, that's what we need more than anything else, is the medicine that and the healing that can come from those sacred sites. And so think about our babies in whichever way that you speak to the mystery, and ask that we put our hearts and our minds together to be able to have a really strong, gentle, kind, fruitful conversation today. And so I make this offering of tobacco and the 7 ribbons, and I'll do the prayer in my language. Haukio magati betsikin kinaskumden. I say me no me pe miugisagak. Ego ma miuk matsu en kape awihia. Kwetsim en kapet magi miako manutsutaka pe mama opia. Kape mama ogiugea kapik square kapik squatoya. Kawitsitoya kamiosikan na miskanam kosit tamawa kutjoasum snow. Wichihinan miuk matsu en miutehewin. Maskausiwen, sohkemuwen, ahkamemuwen katakunama. Kapatita kekunekagimia. Kueskumakaitastikea kamiasik. Anhikan nakatamawa kutsuasimsinawa. Aungawiaski. Ikokumakiemio nakutsikein. Kuetsim nkista kawihiakan mako paketskaman. Nistanan kanaspetata. Haamina nuhkom notuatajukan. Kistamina kinanaskum. Ikohkapektimakemia kitsuasimsa kuksima. Kuetsim nkapewitapmia kuta. Muanuts kawipiks kwatoya kawikiugea. Witsihinan kamiu mamtanehtama kamiu apachihta mamtanehtigannan. Witsihinan sokemuwen kayaak iktauhtsanma meskanaukakiusihtamawaku tsuasimsinawa. Moikawanihtaako yakio kakimi kuusia. Haun mossomakane kistoamina. Ikoksokemuene ai kan heskuahteena kakan mehtame. Kistoamina natohtaunan. Pikskuestamaunaan sitoskaunan. Haun uhtaui. Kinaskum. Hai. Merci.
Thank you very much, Elder Maria, for the prayer and starting us out with your blessings. It's just like, it's such an honor to be here with everyone today. We are very grateful to have 4 esteemed panelists today with us: Simon Brasco, Andrea Carmen, Ray Rabliasquez, and William Young. Very much looking forward to learning from everyone today. So at this point, I'm pleased to introduce our panel moderator, Marilyn Poitras. Marilyn's sensibility to cross-cultural education, governance, and negotiation are informed by teachings in the area of Indigenous law in Cree, Inuit, Métis, and Dene communities, as well as her international work in Mindanao. Marilyn's work with community leadership, students, and elders provide her with a strong foundation for working across the table on issues experienced in Indigenous communities and through governance in Canada today. She has worked with federal, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous levels of governance and has played a role in education for all parties in a number of areas. Marilyn served as the director of the Indigenous Law Center at the University of Saskatchewan, where she is an alumna of Native Law Center Summer Program and College of Law. She received her LLM at Harvard Law School and earns Indigenous law knowledge from elders and the land. She has created a number of community, college, and university programs for Indigenous people covering financial, legal, policy, and resource management. Michif and Irish Scottish, born and raised in southern Saskatchewan, Marilyn comes to her work in this field with passion and conviction and focuses her lens on relationship development on Indigenous front. So Marilyn, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Shabnan. Good morning, everyone. We've had a brief chance to meet people, and I just want to welcome the team that's supporting us and the panelists that you'll be hearing from today. We're about to have a discussion and invite some stories. And when we talk together in our communities, Maria teaches that we're coming into an act of visiting. And traditionally, that would be something that is a practice that was extremely necessary. So Kiogewin, we're going to have a visit. So we hope you have a tea. We hope you have something, a warm drink to hang on to if it's got air conditioning in your homes, and a cool drink if not. And that we are inviting some stories about sustainability, about your life, about what you know about our interrelationship with the land. And to give context from the teachings that I've been exposed to, I'll say that natural law is one of the elements of our traditional teaching. Spiritual law is another practice, and that from spiritual law and natural law, we make human laws. And so that's a context that I'll offer. In this international forum, we can look at conventions, we can look at declarations, we can look at instruments and tools that different countries and international organizations have created. But to talk about those are words on paper or words on a screen. And today we're going to have a conversation about what that meaningful relationship is, how we're all related to each other, including all animate and inanimate beings. And so I'm very excited to hear from people today. We've got our panelists are here. I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one, and then they're going to respond in whatever story moves them to be shared today. And here's the questions that our panelists were given to think about before they came online. What does sustainability mean to you as an Indigenous person? In your Indigenous community, nation, or traditional territory, what is practiced or being done towards sustainability? What has been your experience in terms of applying your knowledge or practices in a World Heritage context? We've started off in a good way. So in our communities, when we have people pray to bring our thinking together, our minds together, we always say we're starting in a good way. We're trying to put everybody's best hearts forward so that we're all wishing and talking towards the same thing. And I want to say thank you to Maria for doing that, and for the reminder in our country right now, where we know that children should be at the center. We're in the midst of a very, very important teaching about sustainability of our people, our culture, our lives, as well as our relationship to those environmental teachings. So I'm going to start us off with Simon Bracapay, and welcome, Simon. And it's nice to see you again. We're trying to figure out what our connection was this morning. We know each other from somewhere. Simon is Anishinaabe Haudenosaunee Bear Clan, a member of the Kitiganzibi Anishinaabe First Nation, Minnewaukee, Quebec in Canada. Simon is an adjunct research professor at Carleton University and Trent University, and he was recently designated Certificate First Nations Health Manager from the First Nations Health Manager Association. Simon has a research interest in land-based healing, traditional medicine, and traditional knowledge. He conducts research and writes on cultural competency and safety. Simon has written and worked in the field of traditional knowledge and intellectual property rights, and he's the chair of CIHR Institute on Aboriginal Peoples Health Advisory Board. Previously, Simon was the Chief Executive Officer of the National Aboriginal Health Organization, Director and Primary Healthcare Division, First Nations and Inuit Health Branch, Health Canada, Aboriginal Affairs Branch, Environmental Canada. So Simon, welcome. Feel free to invite the stories from your heart and respond to the questions in any way you think is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn, and thank you, Maria, for the prayer. You've all said everything that I wanted to say, so maybe I'll just go into telling stories, but stay the topic of the questions that have been posed. So I think just to start with, I think of these discussions, these dialogues as really we're on a bridge. You've got Indigenous people, and then you're reaching out to non-Indigenous people, and you're trying to convey ideas, sustainable thoughts, and how can we work together. I think that's a critical part of all the work that we all do, because the environment isn't always really well understood. So I think, first of all, sustainability for me means making decisions for the seventh generation that Maria spoke about, and making decisions about a sustainable future from the perspective of the sustainable environment, socially, culturally, spiritually. And I remember in the 80s, leading up to the Earth Summit, that people weren't connecting the environment to sustainability, if you can believe it or not believe that, you know. And in the 1980s, a report came out, a Brundtland report, called Our Common Future. And they were, some of the key ideas in the report was the need for environmental education. I was taking courses in economics previous to that, and the economics professor said, we're only ethically responsible for 5 years. And the top of my head just blew off, you know. And I said, well, we think about 7 generations, you know, we're thinking about the children yet to be born. And so I think we're, even though we think we're not moving, we are moving along some kind of a continuum. Maria talked about bimatsu and living a good life. You know, I think all of us want to live a good life. We want to live in a world that is sustainable, that is peaceful, that we're growing food that's healthy food. Food is medicine. And also, we want to have a better future for our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren that we're living in now. We're kind of living on I think an important part of history, all of us. And, the prophecies that many Indigenous people talk about is we're in a time when Indigenous people, their voice and their knowledge needs to be heard by the rest of the world, you know. And that's not to say that people around the world do not have that knowledge. Their ancestors have that knowledge. Their religions have that knowledge. And sometimes we kind of forget some of that knowledge. So we have to kind of dig deep into all of our cultures for that knowledge of sustainability. And so one of the things that I do with my students, I have Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, and I say, the water's sacred, the air is sacred, Mother Earth is sacred. How do I know that? How do you know that? So simply, how long can we live without air? We can only live a few minutes without air. So if you really think about it, that the air is giving us life. And if we think about where does air come from, that our trees around us breathe oxygen. So the Mother Earth is providing us with oxygen that we can live, so that we can live. Isn't that not sacred? Is the air sacred? How long can we live without food? We can only live a few weeks. How long can we live without water? We hear Indigenous people saying water is sacred. We can only live without water for a few days. So water is sacred. I think we have to kind of rethink about the world that we're living in. So Mother Earth is that life-giving force that provides us with water, air, Mother Earth, and also fire is sacred. We need that. We need that sun. I was just reading a book, and I've always, if you remember growing up, I don't know, there was this movie about this person that spoke to animals, and I've met elders that learned from the land. The land is our teacher. The land speaks to us. We just have to find a way to be able to hear their stories. I was thinking about the story of white birch. There's this Ojibwa story about how the white birch got, those slash marks on it. But at Gittigat-Zibi, there's a particular story of that. And we look at everything, everything has pairs, that everything is double. So we're always looking for that balance in the world. So the white birch has a buddy, a conifer, an evergreen tree, and they live together. They live in harmony together. And so way back when, the white birch had no slashes on it. And the white birch, when it was young, it would always be bragging about how beautiful it was. It was the only tree that was white, and you could see it in the forest. And the conifer was getting kind of tired of hearing that. And one day, the creator comes by, and the conifer says, "I'm really getting tired of hearing the white birch bragging about how beautiful it is all the time. So some days I just want to hurt it. Some days I just want to kill it." And the creator says, "Oh no, you have to learn how to live in harmony together. You love each other." And just as the creator was going away, he says, "Well, maybe you could teach it a lesson, And so the one day it got really windy and it was blowing back and forth, and the conifer has these needles with a little sticky sap on it, and it rubs it all over the white birch. And the white birch, of course, scratches and creates these lines. And so, for a young person, it's kind of an interesting story. We like to see interesting things happen in the natural world. So, what does that mean? It's there for all of you to think about. But I recently there's been a lot of books coming out about trees, and what I really liked was it was saying that in the past trees used to compete with each other for light, and now they're discovering that they communicate with each other chemically and through the earth. And a tree that's struggling, the other trees provide it with nutrients and with light. And so, is the world competing, or are we cooperating? I really think that we really do have to learn how to cooperate. And I wanted to. I know I only got a couple more minutes. So the one thing is our community, Gittigat-Zibi, has been trying to create awareness and education of our relationship with the earth. And William Commanda, grandfather, went to the Earth Summit. I went with him to the Earth Summit. I had written a treaty between Indigenous people and environmental NGOs. And so we've been trying to educate people. And more recently, I've been working as a volunteer with the National Gallery of Canada, and we have this gifted and Algonquin word, and kose, which means everything is connected. So the gallery is embodied this idea that they're thinking about the gallery as being beyond the frame. That's kind of flowery art language. That what about the land that they're on? What about the water? What about the earth? What about the Algonquin people whose land the building is on? So I think the work that our elders have done in the past is really communicating some key ideas. And I'll just summarize. Relationality. Everything's related. Everything is sacred. We have to think about the world holistically from a spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental perspective. We need to understand Indigenous education, which is rooted in ancestral knowledge, practices, ceremonies, art, songs, stories, and everybody's personal knowledge, the gifts that they have. And finally, this two-eyed seeing approach that, we have to look at the world from the best of Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous ways of knowing and Western ways of knowing, because that is where we're going to build that bridge. So thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. Miigwech.
Okay, so you're a storyteller, and we can be listening to you for a long time about the stories that you share. You know, there's an elder that I work with that says humans are the smallest part of creation, dependent on all else for everything, and that we forget that we're the smallest part. You really woke that up in me. Thank you for also just reminding us about some of the big puzzle pieces of how we fit together. You know, we don't talk about our prophecies a lot, but that was a very common thing. It was common in my childhood growing up. It's common when you start to work with traditional people about what prophecies are, what they see coming, what they're just told, and where they get information from. So we have a word in Cree, Samaganus, and one of the elders that I worked with was in her 80s, and she told me her grandfather was a Samaganus, and it didn't mean police officer. It meant the person that had to know what supplies you needed for the winter for the whole community and how far to travel. Now, you need to read the signs around you to be able to do that. And your tree analogy, anybody, there's this phenomenon happening with the tree books that you mentioned. So thank you for waking that up in all of us. You know, I'm just appreciating all of this. There's a treaty in Alberta called the Buffalo Treaty. So where those treaties, those larger agreements about how we're going to work together, are starting to take root in a different kind of dynamic way. Thank you so much, Simon, for bringing your stories. And we're going to move on to Andrea now. Andrea Carmen is from the Yaqui Nation, and she says it's actually the Yome. She's going to correct me afterwards for my translation. And she began her work in the International Indian Treaty Council as a student intern in the San Francisco office in 1976, and has been a staff member since 1983 and became its executive director in 1992. Andrea was the International Indian Treaty Council team leader for work on the United Nations Declaration for the Right of Indigenous People, and has many years of experience as a human rights trainer and observer around the world. In 1997, she was one of 2 Indigenous representatives invited to formally address the United Nations General Assembly for the first time in history at the United Nations Earth Summit +5. In 2006, Andrea was a rapporteur for the United Nations Expert Seminar on Indigenous Peoples' Permanent Sovereignty over Natural Resources and their relationship to land, the first time an Indigenous woman had been selected to serve as a rapporteur for the United Nations Expert Seminar. Andrea has served on a number of boards and advisory councils, and in 2010, she was one of 2 members from North America on the Global Steering Committee for the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, which coordinates Indigenous peoples' work with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In February of 2019, Andrea was selected by the Indigenous peoples, tribes, and organizations in North America to serve as the representative on the new facilitating working group for the development of UNFCCC, local communities, and Indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge exchange platform for its first 3 years of operation. So I'm gonna sneak in a commercial for the jurisdiction of women as well. You know, something that we talk about traditionally here is that women's roles and voices as mothers and first teachers and aunties and grandmothers is so crucial. And so we're about to hear from one of our leaders. Welcome, Andrea.
Nosem chokwe utesia. Si imi and Mayim, we say in Yaqui, all my relations, everything's related to follow what Simon said. I'm going to be sharing a screen, and while I do that, let's see how I can do this. I want to thank our elder with the opening prayer and also the organizers of this event. I want to speak about the crisis that we're all facing and the challenge to sustainability in the long term, which, you know, as the former speaker addressed, you know, for us isn't 5 years or 10 years, it's generations in the future. And that's the crisis of climate change, but also to look at Indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge and cultural heritage as a solution for our own peoples and nations, but also now recognized, as you mentioned in the introduction, by the global community. I want to just start by looking at this picture of traditional sustainability from an Indigenous perspective. It's a traditional corn altar from Mexico, and you can see we talk about the 4 directions colors, the ribbons that were presented this morning to the elder that did our opening prayer, and the black, the yellow, the red, and the white are traditional colors for many of our ceremonies throughout the Indigenous world, but they're also representing the very practical biodiversity of our traditional seeds when it comes to corn, and looking at what kind of corn our elders know if it's going to be a wet year or a dry year, a hot year or a cold year, and therefore what color and type of corn to present. So it's a blend of our spiritual base as well as our very practical day-to-day survival. But it's also a picture of our rights, because without our rights to land, to water, to the protection of our original biodiversity and seeds, we cannot practice our food sovereignty as a basis of resiliency. I'm trying to change the slide. I know there's a way to do it. On a rights-based approach, and of course I'm not going to, you know, read all of these to you, but just to recognize that the right to development in international law, including in the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 3, is firmly tied to what we call the right to development. And we had a big debate about whether we even want to use that word because we usually experience imposed development. But the right to development includes economic, social, and cultural development. And that's many times forgotten. So we decided we would reclaim it and continue to reassert that right. The UN Declaration also affirms the right to the environmental protection and productive capacity of our lands. As a right recognized for the first time, really, in the international standard, that tie between environmental protection and our right of survival. This is an important right to cultural heritage is what we're talking about today in the context of sustainability. And it's important to recognize that the UN Declaration recognizes that seeds, our cultural practices, our knowledge of flora and fauna, plants and animals are part of our cultural heritage that needs to be protected as a right. This picture, I think, is really important. It's a corn seed, a corn seedling that was being thinned out. But look at the size of the root on it. This comes from the desert farmers, the Hopi peoples here in northern Arizona. And the knowledge of that seed about how to survive, how to go down into the ground where there's no running water. It's just pure rain. Water in the desert community. That is a picture of sustainability, of how we can learn from our traditional seeds and plants. Of course, in the climate crisis, the United Nations is recognizing that over 1 million species are facing extinction, including the salmon. And many other varieties that are essential for the way of life and survival and the right to food of Indigenous peoples. I just want to show a few slides about something that's happening right now. The United Nations is holding a food system summit in September, and Indigenous peoples were finally, it seemed like an afterthought, but finally reached out to contribute to the track called resiliency of food systems, which of course is another way to to say sustainability. This is another picture of desert farming in the high deserts of Arizona. We reached out to Indigenous peoples around the world. This is just 3 examples of the flyer. We had 5 languages, and we had a Zoom consultation with 96 Indigenous presenters from all 7 regions of the world. And they agreed that they would call upon the world community to implement 4 commitments, including respect for rights of Indigenous peoples, respect to caretake of our environment and restore it as needed, take care of our biodiversity, that they would commit to support our own self-defined responses to climate change, to the COVID-19 crisis and other crises that we're facing, and that they would take measures to protect and to respect our traditional knowledge and ways of knowing. And we made one commitment of Indigenous peoples, that we would involve our children and youth in all aspects of our food production, because that is our sustainability as well for our ways of life. We also conducted an online survey in which we actually got responses from Indigenous food producers from 28 countries, all 7 regions, and representing more than 3 million Indigenous peoples. And we said, wait, can that number be right? But we looked at a response from the king and chief of the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh, representing 1.6 million people, treaties 1 through 11 representing 240 distinct traditional governments in Canada, Kowika, and it certainly added up to that many people. We also received a lot of responses from family farmers and family fishers, representing 15 people. So it was quite a range, and 75% identified as food producers. We got responses by all regions. North America and Latin America were the largest number of responses from all ecosystems, as you can see. And all forms of food systems, fishing, hunting, marine mammals, farming, gathering, herding, and others as well. And I just wanted to point out that 78% said that their food systems had been impacted by human rights violations. 97% said that crisis situations, including climate change impacts, had impacted their food systems. And a large percentage also said that their own solutions, this is seed trading that we implemented during the COVID-19 crisis here in Arizona to help some of the tribes that were experiencing food shortages, that our solutions had not been implemented by either countries or the international arena. And this is important for today's discussion, is a full 98% of the respondents, and remember, we're talking about representation of over 3 million Indigenous individuals, reported that their traditional knowledge and cultural heritage was vital for the resiliency and vitality of their food systems. And lastly, I will point up the importance that was affirmed by 99% about the importance of the intergenerational transmission of our knowledge, the role of our elders and our youth in sharing and sustaining these ways. I'll just end by pointing out a couple of the solutions by Indigenous peoples ourselves, apart from anything the United Nations or the countries do. Last year was the hottest, driest summer ever recorded in Arizona. And you can see on the right are our traditional food plants called the Nepal Cactus. On the left is their normal look, and this is how they looked last summer. And they're indigenous to here, and they were not making it through the summer. And this year, I think, was even hotter. So we've reestablished some of our trade routes where we're able to trade seeds, especially drought resistant seeds, like we always did with each other, you know, pre-colonial days. These are indigenous peoples from Oklahoma, United States, Mexico, and Guatemala, trading seeds to be able to adapt their growing methods to the climate crisis. This is here in Arizona. The Tonotam created a rain repository just out of natural clay. And this is them using it for their irrigation systems. So indigenous peoples are revitalizing and using their traditional knowledge and methods to respond and ensure we're able to adapt. This is a picture of a water system in Hawaii in the original form from the sky to the earth. And now on the right is how it looks now with the golf course and Air Force Base. But the indigenous peoples of Hawaii are replanting their taro, removing invasive species that use a lot of water like eucalyptus, and themselves restoring those water systems that went all the way from the sky down to the ocean. And my last example is what was raised too about restoring the buffalo, that bringing back our traditional foods not only responds to climate change because local foods have a lower carbon footprint, but also the buffalo don't tear up the grasslands that hold the soil and hold the water in the same way that cattle do. And one example of the vitality of these sustainable original food sources was back in October 2015, 100,000 cattle died in a freak snowstorm, out of season snowstorm, but not one buffalo died. They were able to adapt. So again, this is a picture of sustainability I want to end with. Our elders passing on this knowledge to our children and young people, because that again is the center of long-term sustainability for us as Indigenous peoples, facing these crisis situations that we're faced with now, but also preserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much for that. You know, one of the words that we use when we talk about treaties in Canada is we talk about treaty and inherent rights. And when I'm working with elders, one of the things we talk about when we talk about rights is the other side of that, the responsibility that goes with it and what is inherent. And one of the elders says, you know, we're all Indigenous to some place, and those teachings that you don't leave those teachings. And so what's it mean to have these inherent rights? And the image you have of the teacher and the child and is so impactful, because that knowledge can't be transferred when our children are being taken from us. It can't be transferred when we don't have access to the seeds that you talked about, the practices that you talked about. And so, you know, this sustainability that we have for traditional methods can only go so far if we can reinstitute or maintain the institution of those traditional teachings. So beautiful slides. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just a final comment to what you said, that we don't have any way to say human rights in our language. And in fact, I've never found an Indigenous people that has those words. We say the closest we could come would be to say Yoamem Tekya, the people's responsibility to the creator and the created world and to each other. So yes, you're very right. We do talk about inherent rights, but more important, inherent responsibilities.
Nice, right? That interconnected, where our relationship is set up because of the reciprocity that's required to maintain it. Beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. The next speaker that we're going to hear from today is Ray Rabliasquez. And I'm hoping I'm saying your name properly, Ray, from Poplar River First Nation. He's worked for Poplar River First Nation as a traditional lands guardian program coordinator for 25 years. Ray has also served as the director of Poplar River's traditional healing program for 10 of those years. Ray has been involved in the Pimatuin World Heritage Site Project as the Manitoba First Nations Community Coordinator and board advisor for the Pamatuan Aki Corporation. He is Poplar River's advisor to Pamatuan Aki. So Ray, I invite you to come on and give us some of the stories you'd like to share with us today. You'll need to unmute yourself. If I could get somebody maybe to unmute Ray, whoever's got the hosting privileges. Hi. Maybe while we're waiting on Ray, I could move over to William. Oh, William, are you available? Great. William, I'm just going to read your bio, okay?
Sure.
Okay, William Young. We're gonna move over to William while Ray gets ready here. William is from the Bloodvine River First Nation, grew up on the land, and has remained there for the majority of his life in community of the Bloodvine River. He's the co-chair of the board of directors for the Pamatuan Aki Corporation that is accountable for the conservation and protection of the outstanding universal value of the Pamatuan Aki World Heritage Site. So William, welcome. I know you're on the phone. I just want to invite you to give us the stories that you have. I can let you know that the questions a little bit earlier, I know we were having trouble getting you on, and I can remind you that we're just talking about sustainability, what it means to you, your community, your traditional territories. So tell us any stories you want to about what's being practiced towards that today and your experience with those practices.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll begin by speaking a little bit in my language, my Anishinaabe name, and the clan that I belong to. Te tapsi bines nishnikas namain to them. And also that I just wanted to begin, I guess, by acknowledging our elders of our community here, in my community of Bloodvine River, and also the importance of my collaboration or my visits with my grandfather as I was growing up in the community. And he was the one that told me the importance of maintaining and protecting our land from mainly industrialism, and that was his concern. And I was just a young boy when I used to visit him, and I didn't really know what he meant by protecting the land. But as I grew up and attended school and all that, and then it started to make sense to me. I lived in the city for a bit in Winnipeg, and then I was going to school, and then I moved back home eventually and started participating. It sounds like my phone is going to die here. Just a minute. Ronnie, is there another phone? Yeah, so are you still there? Hello?
We sure are. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I just got to get another phone, I think. Just hang on. Ronnie? Ron? Did you say there's another phone? This one's dying. Okay, just a minute. You still there?
Yes,
Hello?
we're still here. How are you doing? Is your phone working?
I'm getting another one here, so this one's not working. I don't know, we're having issues with our internet as well. Anyway, the sustainability practice in our community have always been practiced by our elders, and now is being taught to our present generation, and that's exactly what we're doing here in our community. and it's been a challenge because
I've just mustard relish.
Hello.
We can still hear you, William. I'll just invite Ray to put his phone or computer on mute. There we go. We can hear you, William.
Okay, just hang on.
All kinds of technical issues, right? This is the world we live in now.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. You can still hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sustainability, like I said, the sustainability has always been practiced in our community by our elders, and that's being taught now to this generation. And it is challenging. And the reason I say that is because there's been, how can I say this? Lack of knowledge, I guess, from the younger generation. They're more into they've lost their ways, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. They've lost their identity is one of the things that they've lost, and I call it an identity crisis because they don't know who they are. They don't know they're Anishinaabe, and we're trying to instill that into them today, to teach them. We have some community members that are trying their very hard to teach the present generation now, and it's a very slow process, and like I said, it is challenging in our community right now because a lot of the younger generation have lost their language. They barely speak it. They can understand some, they can speak some, but they can't carry on a conversation with myself or other community members of my generation. And in terms of protecting and sustaining our wildlife, there's issues now with sustainability in terms of with wildlife because we have an all-weather road that comes into our community now. We've had the all-weather road for 7 years now, and now we have people or hunters, I guess, are coming into our area, and the concern that we have with that is that because these are dangerous hunters. And the reason I say that is because we've seen them ourselves where they go shooting around the river system which we have here, and also the alcohol that they consume while they're hunting, and that's a very dangerous practice. And we've never had those kind of issues before. And there's also the issues of sport hunting. There's also the issue of poaching and hunting out of season, and these are issues that we're having to deal with right now. And so sustainability for us is I guess encompasses a whole wide variety of things where people come in from the south, drive into our traditional area, and
William, I wonder if I could get you to move a little closer to the phone. We can hear you, but it sounds like you're quite far away.
Oh, okay. And like I said, we're having issues here with our technology, I guess, and is it making sense what I'm saying?
So we're talking, yeah, you're talking about sustainability and some of the complications with it, and some of the issues that are coming up with it. Do you want to add to that?
some of the issues?
You might want to talk to us about what Pimatuinaski is doing and your role there, the work that you're doing. Would you like to talk about that?
Oh, sure. I've been involved with Pimatuinaski since 2002, and I've been involved directly with it, like I said, since 2002. So that's been 19 years that I've been involved with Pimatuinaski, and the reason I got involved was because of my granddad, and to protect and manage our traditional territories. And it has been challenging. The reason I say that is because most of the present generation right now can't speak the language, don't know the issues with the land and the sustainable practices that we practiced before, and we're trying to bring that back now. We have some members within our community that are helping out, and it's ongoing, and but like I say, it's challenging, and because of the crisis, I guess, is what I call it, the identity crisis. They don't know who they are. They don't know their Anishinaabe, and because they speak English more, and they're more into this technology, the games and stuff, and they haven't been out in the land, but that's slowly changing now. The last couple of years, we're working with our youth, our students, and our children, and putting up camps for them, and teaching them the medicine picking. We have our own members that do that, and the other thing we also do is that we have sacred sites along the river system here on the Blood Vein River itself, and there's some pictographs as well, and so that's what we do with the kids here and the youth here in the community. Even with some of the adults here, we work with them on that, and we're hoping to change that in the next few years, and maybe make it a little better, more accessible for the whole community. But we're having challenges right now with the whole community. Not everybody is into this culture because of the influence, I guess, of the missionaries or the religion, and so those are the issues that we're currently facing right now. But like I said, we're working on it, and hopefully in the next few years it will get a little better, and we're slowly getting our culture, our ceremonies, and our traditions back, and so that's what we're working right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, William. Thank you for being persistent with the tech issues also. You know, I'll add, just before Ray comes on, I'll add that land-based learning is something that is starting to become it's starting to become something that's part of many colleges and universities, as well as high school and elementary school programs here. Just to add to the conversation about how do we re-engage our youth, how do we reinstitute language, how do we reinstitute practices, so there's succession planning among our community members as well. And you know, in Saskatoon, Maria Campbell, who's an elder that's working with us today, has been working on what it would mean to have land-based learning in urban centers, so that we can talk about sustainability in those ways too. So thank you very much, William. I'm going to move on to Ray. Ray, are you? Can you hear me, Ray? And how's your microphone? And can we ask you to turn your video on?
No, that I have trouble with the video, because if I turn it on, you won't be able to hear me speak.
No problem.
And I didn't shave this morning for a few weeks. So
okay.
Anyway, you read my. Sorry. Go ahead.
William, I'll get you to put your phone on mute so that we can hear Ray.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Ray,
Okay,
welcome.
good morning. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for who presented and talked, and thank for the beautiful prayer, and say hello to my partner and friend there, William. My name is Ray Rabliasquez. To start off, it's important. I am not an Indigenous person, but so if you want me to turn off again, I will. It's up to you. I just wanted you to know that so there's no confusion. So you don't mind?
Adopt you, Ray. We'll adopt you.
Okay, that's
Okay.
good because I already received that beautiful blanket that you sent, and my wife has claimed it, so it would have been hard to take it back.
Perfect.
Anyway, I've lived here in Poplar River. I've been working here and living here for over 40 years, and I lived in Churchill for a long time, for about 10 years, and I hunted and trapped with elders there. I was just fortunate in my life that they let me do that, and it's important that we Poplar River itself, our traditional territory, is about 2 million hectares, and it's beautiful land. It's strong, it's healthy, and the people are strong and healthy. And those ancestors that have lived here for at least 7,000 or 8,000 years, they practice true sustainability. That's why that land is the way it is today, is because of that true sustainability that they practice. And when William had talked about the fact that we lost a lot of that, our elders recognized that, and they gathered, they told us, like people in my age group, there's a bunch of us, they told us, you need to do that work. You need to help us to teach our children. You need to help us to teach government. You have to help us to teach everyone about this land and why it's important. And they gave us that commitment. And for a lot of us, it's been a commitment for life, because that's what elders expect. So what we tried to do, and oh yeah, just to make it clear, when we say land, our elders mean all life on the land, all life, water, birds, fish. It's just an expression to use to make it easier to, instead of repeating them all. And they wanted to protect that land. They wanted to protect that land for the same reasons everybody says. They wanted to keep it the same for the future of their children and grandchildren. And we know that's important. They wanted to help heal their people who were suffering and still are a lot from all the stuff that's been going on in their lives through residential school, colonization, the stuff that still exists today. They wanted their young people. They had a feeling they were losing. They had lost their young people, and that's mostly their education. The elders they weren't important anymore. The school took over, and anyway, so they wanted that back. And they said to us, if we want healing, we need to be able to have a good, strong, healthy land for that to happen. We needed our young people to be part of that. But also at the same time, they wanted, in terms of governance, they wanted to be able to have a say in what happens in their traditional territory. So we spent a few years doing that, developing lands plan, which was based totally on our, well, not totally, but it was based mostly on our elders' teaching, and we combined some scientific stuff there. We went through that, and the whole community was involved in that plan. And the plan, it was in place. They wanted the young people to know about the traditional teachings. They wanted the young people to know what their language was, their culture. They wanted to be part of that in our lands plan, and later on the World Heritage Sites, allowing that to happen. They did set up a healing program. They got some funds from, that was mentioned in my bio there. They got some funds from the Healing Foundation, and they had camps in the bush, and they had 8 years. We went out there 4 times, like maybe 50, 60 kilometers from the community in the bush. And our elders said, that's the only place we're going to learn. That's the only place we're going to be able to revive that, because the spirits of that land are still there. And they're the ones that are going to give those young people and even those ones, their parents and their grandparents who are suffering, they're going to give them that strength so that they can be able to understand and learn. And we were able to do that for 8 years, and we were very fortunate. We were in the camps where the money that came was originally for the elders and the ones who went to residential school. They refused to take it for themselves. And out of their kindness and their beautiful knowledge, they said, we want to share it with the community so that all of them will learn and all of them can benefit. And especially they wanted their children. And I can't really teach anybody stuff, but I wouldn't mind. I can talk a little bit about what went from there. So we did develop a land plan, and we received protection for their traditional territory from the province. And we also, at the same time, we went through that healing program. We also rekindled relationships with neighboring communities, with Williams community, and Bud Bend River is part of it. And we got together. There was four communities, and they sat together, and they did that. For over almost 2 years, we sat and met and talked about what we needed to do and what the communities needed to do. And one of them was to become part of we looked at becoming part of the World Heritage Site. We're making our combined territories part of the World Heritage Site. And we also we joined up with two provincial provinces who had provincial parks, but they were originally, before they took it, they were in those First Nations traditional territories. So that became part of it. And through that World Heritage Site, they also the community saw it as a way, is also because part of the nomination, the big part of the nomination was about the culture, not just the natural side. It was about the people and the land and the people themselves. And part of it was it's in there that we want to protect that language, we want to protect that culture, like William had mentioned. But at the same time, I mean, I don't keep referring to William, but it's very difficult these days to our young people, and it's taken us a long time. We've been doing this for 20 years, and the camps we had were remarkable. The change in the people in the community, but we have to continue that. We have to keep continuing that. And a big part of our lands program, we have a guardians program, is that the guardians will work with the elders and the youth in the community, out of the community, and on the land to make sure that they get that healing and that help. And it is difficult. So I don't think I left anything else I wanted to say. Oh, stuff that we with the province, we do have a right to speak for our traditional territory. It's in legislation. Our lands plan is part of legislation. And so we have the right to make decisions on our land here, and based on what people want. Sometimes, depending on who's the premier. Yeah, we have good rights and good relations with the government. And we're still going ahead. We're going to keep working, and for all the same reasons. One of my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, said, without that land and a healthy land, people will die. And he meant what he was talking about, us as well as the whole planet. So it's pretty basic. We have to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen. That's it for me. Very much. Thanks for listening. And I hope I didn't mean to offend people when we talk. And I wanted to know I do have the right to speak for Poplar River. I have that. I was given that right. I can't speak for them, but I can speak about them, and that's what I tried to do. Very much.
Thank you. And that's great. Really appreciate pulling it back to what Simon talked about. We're all part of this, that we're all related to this, that we're all part of this land. And when you talk about on the land education, and we know that on the land education is revitalizing not just for the land, but for the people who are being educated as well. I think that's a really important, we look for symbols for our health and where you find that. So I just am grateful for those kinds of reminders. Thank you so much. I just want to go back to Simon and Andrea, who spoke earlier. sometimes when you're one of the first speakers, something someone else says reminds you of another story. And so I just want to see if you have any other comments that you wanted to add after listening to the other panelists. And Simon, I'll ask you first and you can let us know.
So I just unmuted myself. So I think I heard a lot that reminds me of different stories, but the one comment on the buffalo was this idea of a dish with one spoon. You know, it's probably a similar concept that both the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee have, and it's actually a belt, a wampa belt. But what it teaches us is that we may live in an area or a territory that is shared by different Indigenous groups. So like you look around the Toronto area, you had Anishinaabe there, and you had the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee there. But you have to think about that territory as a dish, and we all are eating from that same dish, and we all have one spoon. You know, it's you can't overhunt it, you can't overfish it. And what we found was, at early contact, fish were overhunted or overfished. The territories were dramatically changed. But I think this idea is coming back to us, and it's a very powerful treaty, but also a very powerful symbol that we should all be thinking about. So that was one idea, and I think maybe Andrea may have something else to add. I can see her eyes going there.
Andrea, do you want to add to that?
I will, and there are a couple of things that came up, but I think one of the most important is how a couple of the speakers talked about the challenges of bringing our young people into this work and into these practices again. And we're finding the same thing, with the traditional farming practices. But what we're finding is that in this new generation, there are young people that are very eager to learn it. Not all of them, but some of them. And our tradition teaches that some of those old spirits, the old souls, are coming back again now. And you can really see that in some of the kids, they like their cell phones and, all those things, but they're also want to learn about how you talk to the plants, how you talk to the seeds, how to hear what they say. And we can't give up hope on that. We also, especially with everything coming out with clandestine cemeteries and the mass graves, people are really thinking in a more profound way about the long-term impacts of the deliberate destruction of our culture through the residential schools in Canada, what's called the boarding schools in the United States, the policy that was stated, kill the Indian, save the child, or save the man, that was deliberate. It was deliberately done, the destruction of our languages and the separation of our children from our culture. So that needs to be a mobilization, that we take that into consideration, that it's not their fault. It's not their parents' fault that they don't speak the language or don't want to speak it, that needs to be integrated into all aspects of our work. And it was deliberately done, just like the killing of the buffalo was deliberately done for the sake of colonization, to subjugate us. And we need to fight back. And I think had a Zoom call with the Kamloops, chiefs and council, and they said that their belief is that the children are being found now because we're strong enough to be able to take it, to work with it where we weren't before. So I feel that that's the same thing about bringing our children back into these ways. There are kids out there that want it. I don't know why, but they're here and they do. So I think we need to, focus on them maybe first and seek them out and make that available to them. And that's a commitment we have to all make. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for just bringing that to life for us. And, we had a panel a couple of days ago, and one of the panelists there said, a traditional knowledge keeper said, these children are coming back to remind us to look after the children we have today. And I have a 17-year-old son, and when he was about 4 months old, I was at a conference in Halifax, and an elder from the north came, and she watched him eat his breakfast with his father, and she came over and put her hand on his head, and she said, this is an old man back to talk to us. You know that, don't you? And he's been told that so many times, and I see it in other people's children now that's been turned on for me, and just really appreciate you bringing that back. I read something years ago about a conversation Christopher Columbus had before he came over, and it was, rip the mother tongue from them and that will change everything. And so that level of reparation goes directly into sustainability, right? That we have to look after our own. Thank you both. I'm going to tell you there's a couple of questions in the question and answer, and I'm going to read the first one. It's heartening to see Indigenous traditional cultural practices adapting to current conditions today. Considering the accelerating warming and disruptions brought about by climate change, how does the 7 generations principle adapt or respond to that acceleration? Who would like to? Simon, would you like to start?
Well, I would. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I think one thing is thinking 140 years down the road, or 200 years down the road. What does that actually mean? And so, what are the principles that we should be applying to that type of thinking? So I went through some of the earlier ideas that I kind of summarized. So one of the principles is thinking holistically, thinking about it from the spiritual aspect, from the physical and emotional and mental aspect. What kind of a world do we envisage in 7 generations? How does that get passed on? So one way is through our children, and Andrea talked about these old souls that are amongst us, and my grandchildren all are moving toward that old soul idea, and they ask questions we never talked about, so I think that's heartening. The other is getting the knowledge passed on from the knowledge keepers and elders to the next generation. How do we do that? I think Andrea was talking about having the children in the center. One of the Anishinaabe governance models is children in the middle, elders next to them, and then you have the adults around them. And so ensuring that knowledge gets passed on, and then looking at people's gifts. Everybody has a gift, and igniting that spirit within that child. My grandmother was a midwife, and I didn't really understand this when I was young. So she was looking at a baby, and she said, that baby knows everything. And I go, what do you mean? What do you mean that baby knows everything? And then a few years ago, I met some other midwives of Cree, and they were saying when the spirit comes from the spirit world into the physical world, that spirit already knows everything, and so all we do is remind it. but it's not just us that remind it. It reminds the child. It's the animal world, the plant world. We all know in our heart and our spirit that these spirits are talking to us. That when something is truthful, it hits you like a thunderbolt, and it's because something is talking to your spirit. And so I think the other thing we have to think about is this process, this transition process or transformative process that we all go through, from children to youth to adults to elders, is transformative. And then how do we ignite that transformative process? And we do it through basic principles that you don't interfere with another person. You try to ignite that spirit, as I've said, and there are different ceremonies that you could use to help ignite that spirit. So there's a lot of things that I think that are coming to the fore. One of my daughters asked me to do a walking out ceremony for her first son, and in our community we haven't done walking out. We don't remember walking out. So a friend of mine so we did a walking out. We did our best. I went to see some walking out ceremonies, and so those ideas, those ceremonies, those new learnings, the transformation of all of us happens slowly. We think it's slow through our lifetime, but it's very quick, and we need to pass on that knowledge.
Beautiful. I think when I work in community and I work with elders, we're definitely taught that the reason that the youth are disconnected and disillusioned is because we don't give them responsibilities. And in the past, even children had responsibilities for medicine picking and all of the preparation, and that it's vital for the child to feel that they have this vital role in the community. And one of the elders that I work with says that when you have a baby, babies come to the world with their fists closed, and if you go near their fists, they grab onto you right away, and that they come with all the knowledge of the universe. And as they get older and their hands unfold, they're forgetting what they brought so they can learn it again. And so you reminded me of that story when you talked about the midwives and the children and the babies in the middle and the elders around them and the adults around that as this growth cocoon. That's how that works, that interrelatedness. Andrea and Ray, I think we've lost William. I don't see him on the call here. And so I'll just leave it open to the three of you to do any sort of further wrap ups. And I'm going to tell you that you both kind of touched on this, but Brian Sinclair has a question, and you both kind of touched on this, and Ray, you also touched on this in your comments. Thank you for sharing your stories. Modern society promotes thinking that we are what we own, that new, fast, big, beautiful are the best. There's a growing shift and loss of values within our societies, especially by young people, Indigenous and non alike. Given the importance of history, culture, language, and the arts, and an intergenerational view to sustaining the quality of life, how are youth brought back to the table, engaged in conversation, and empowered towards the positive? So if you have a story about working with a youth you want to share, please feel free to add that. And Andrea, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm going to reflect on, I'll tell a story about myself as a youth. Talking to my nana, my Yaqui grandmother, who was a survivor of a massacre. Our people were at war until 1939. Now we have the only treaty on the Mexico side, between Mexico and Indigenous nation. Here we have a federally recognized, tribe and reservation. But I was probably being bratty, I don't know, 17 years old, and said, well, I said in Spanish to her, but I said, Nana, how can we live traditionally in this day and age, in the modern era? And she said to me, you take the values of your traditional culture and you apply them to your life in the modern era. And the fact that impacted me, still, I'm telling the story today, 50 years later, so I think, she said a very wise thing, because it made me stop and think. I think that's what we have to do with our young people. So, that's a story of me as a young person being taught something that I'm still using today. And in fact, look, I just told the story of what she said so long ago to me as a young person. Probably try to, be smart, be smart. So I want to say one other thing, and that's the challenge of how we work with the outside world, I guess. I became chair. I just passed that on in May of this brand new body at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for the exchange of traditional knowledge and practices, and not just with countries and the UN, but with a platform so we can keep exchanging with other Indigenous peoples about the climate crisis and how we're going to survive it, how we're going to take those traditional practices and values and apply them, exactly like my grandma said, to the crisis we're facing now, including maybe, using different kinds of seeds. And one of the consultations we had with all these countries, in fact, took place, the one that took place in North America was in Ontario, hosted by the Canadian government 3 or 4 years ago. And there was a lot of hesitancy by Indigenous peoples to say, wait, should we even do this? Should we know what it means to them to share, right? We have that experience for 527 years now. They don't share, they take it, and they're going to patent, and they're going to write a thesis and get a grant to make a book about our knowledge and patent our seeds and genetically modify them. And so I came back and talked to my husband, who's a traditional knowledge holder, a healer, and a traditional farmer that is teaching a lot of our young people about those things. And he said to me, we don't need to worry about that, because unless you're the one that can talk to the seeds and listen to what they say, and talk to the plants and listen to what they say, it's not going to work for you. They need us now, and they're suddenly realizing it because they're scared of what they know is coming. Now, finally, they're turning to us, but we don't have to worry because they can't take it. They need us to guide them, and it's up to us if we want to. So I just wanted to pass on those 2 stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ray or Simon, do you want to add anything? I'll add a bit of context here before you jump in. There's a final question here, and it says, thank you for everything you've shared. I'm wondering what you see as ways for settlers, adults, and children to support and participate in strengthening this mindset. And I'm just adding that comment because I think Gladys teaches me that when you want to understand something, you go outside and there's something to teach you there. So I had a mountain ash outside my patio door, and she said, you want to know who your teacher is? It's that tree that's been standing outside your door looking at you for 10 years. What's that tree teaching you? And when I worked with her on the land, and we had a single mother that was really telling people with great description how difficult her life was, she grabbed her hand and said, come with me. We're going to go find a deer. These deer have something to teach you. They've been single parenting for a very, very long time. And so just that invitation to know that if you are listening, you can go outside and learn more than humans can teach you, and you have your own relationship with that. And so I'll just put that out there as a seed. Simon or Ray, anything to add?
I'll wait for Ray.
Okay, Ray?
Okay, thanks, Simon. What I wanted to speak about was the youth. Part of those healing camps we had inland in the bush was twice a year we would bring only the youth out to the bush with the elders, and immediately the elders started off with traditional ceremonies, feasts and sweats and all those. What we found was a lot of these young people at first were really shy of it. And what really surprised us was it didn't take long for them to get right into it. They understood it, they felt comfortable, they were part of it, and they were learning from it. And what I was told was that those young people, it's in them, it's in their blood memory, the language, the culture, being with the spirits and understanding the spirits, and it will come to them. And they don't have a problem doing it. And that was a really beautiful experience for us. Every single camp with the youth was exactly the same thing, happened over and over again. And we were still, even we had camps with families where people would bring their children and young children. And it was the same with those young children. And it was the same with most of those people. They don't have, the children don't have blocks. They don't have years of being told that stuff is no good. It's in them, and we need to help them bring it out. And I know it's hard to do that in a city, but it's nice to be able to take, in a lot of programs, take youth from the city and take them out into the communities do that. They take them out into the bush. And that's why the elders wanted to do that. We used to, for inviting people, like one of the main teachings of our community was that I found when I first came here was the elders taught about being welcoming and being kind to strangers, no matter who they were, no matter what race they were from or what people they were. And they would welcome into their community. And even up until recently, they people would come up and the elders would have a ceremony. They would smoke their pipes and have a sweat. They didn't, not so much sweat lodge, but they had ceremonies that invited them into the community and welcomed them there. Sometimes big groups. And they need to be, everybody needs to be included in those teachings for them to understand it. And they continue to do that, not as much now because we can't do much under restrictions, but they haven't, that was what they were, I was really surprised. And actually I was amazed at how welcome they are to non-native people or non-Indigenous people. It really was wonderful. And that's still going on. And that's they talk about reconciliation. Anishinaabe are the ones who are practicing reconciliation. They don't mind. The elders that went through residential school, the ones that went through our program, they talked about forgiveness. They talked about kindness, and they've been horribly abused. We spent years listening to them and helping them to speak, and they shared with us. And they would reach out to people. They want them to know what happened. And to me, that's what comes from that. The young people need to know that, and they need to be with the elders to learn it. And for most purposes, it's much simpler to go out in the land and do it without distractions. So all that time.
Ray, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. So, and you described it. You described it really well. I think.
Thank you.
I've been doing a lot of work on evidence-based. Doing literature search on land-based healing, and the big takeaways is the land heals. The land heals, and culture is therapy. And I met an elder who I've known for maybe about 20 years, and he said he didn't really believe in mental illness. And he said in his community, there was a man who had real severe mental illness, we'll say. And his father said, well, he could come and live with us. Well, we're gonna live on the land. So they were they literally were living on the land. And he said after 3 years, all those symptoms went away. And it's because, we as humans need the land. We desperately need the land. I think Ray talked about the children going on the land and then immediately fitting in. So there's research that says you take children with ADD, take them into a park in a city, a lot of the symptoms of ADD disappears, or you could take children that are having difficulties in your community on the land as part of the healing process. Or you could, I worked in one community where 5 young men had been sentenced to prison. And they said, all we're going to do if we send them to prison is make them into criminals. And so they were sentenced to alternative sentencing to heal on the land. And so they got prepared to go on the land. They worked with elders and knowledge keepers on the land about what they want to do with their life. And when they came back, they were welcomed by the community from their land-based healing. And then they were provided them with resources to, what did you decide you were going to do? So a couple of them started hunting and fishing and providing those foods for elders. One went on a drug rehabilitation program. One didn't do anything. And then the other went back to school. But they never recommitted their crimes. If you went to prison in 3 years, 85% of them would recommit. So I think all across Canada, there's been a revitalization of this land-based healing. And elders have said that for dozens, hundreds of years, that we really need education on the land. We really need that healing on the land. It's critical. And it's not just Indigenous people. There's schools in Holland that are land-based. There's a few schools here in Canada that are land-based. There's a university here in Canada that's land-based. So we really need that kind of an education. And one last point, there was a Indigenous professor at University of Toronto. So during during COVID last winter, she had a land-based program, so they couldn't go on the land. So what she had, the individual students, wherever they were to connect to the land where they were. So there's ways of doing these things. Big Witch.
Thank you, Simon. One of the last comments is about the implications of COVID and seeing the impact of consumerism and capitalism and that not being part of sort of a traditional practice. And I think that it is true that we are all learning the lessons in different ways, and the students were struggling. The university students were struggling this last year with being so isolated from each other. High school students struggling with that level of isolation. And Maria and I sent the students out with FaceTime, or a partner on FaceTime, and they had to go out and they had to find something in nature to represent what they were going through at the time. And reintroducing people to the land was quite eye-opening in a way that I don't think I fully appreciated was going to be. We forget how dependent we are on that, and that when you go back to look at it and rejuvenate that relationship, how humbling it is and how amazing it is, which is something Ray touched on. Maria Campbell is sitting with us, and I just want to invite her to also bring some comments into the discussion before we wrap up. So I'm going to turn this over to Maria right now.
I want to thank all of you for your really beautiful, powerful words. Especially what you had to say about young people and children. some of you said really precious, wonderful teachings that you shared with us. Simon, you talked about babies being in the center and elders. That was one of my teacher's teachings, old Peter O'Cheese, was what he gave our lodge that we always remember. And it's a teaching that many of us who grew up on the land lived with, without ever thinking of it as a teaching. And it's, we can't stress enough how important that is, because sustainability is of no use to us to even talk about it if we can't put our children in the center and think about how we're going to pass that on. I get very tired of hearing the word healing. And I'm saying this with the greatest respect, because, we can always get money from everybody to heal ourselves. And one of the things that my old teacher said is that government will always give us money to pick our scabs. And that sounds really terrible, but what it does is it keeps us in a state of being victims. And the word teaching, and especially when we talk about land-based teaching, how important that is, because as Ray said, there can't be any kind of healing unless teachings are involved. And maybe one of the things when we think about sustainability is that we also think about the kinds of words that we use, because in our own languages, when we're being doctored, or our old people are sitting with us, they never talk to us about how sick we are. They talk to us about the things that we need to be balanced and healthy. And we're always told in my language, think very carefully and say that word very gently and unpack it and look at it, and where does it come from? What does it mean? And how is it grounded? And how can we take the medicine from that and use it? And I think that's what all of you were talking about in different kinds of ways. We have to give our children as much power and energy and life force as we can have. And the only way we can do that is to acknowledge that it wasn't their fault that this happened, that they have no languages, that they have no culture, that their identity is lost. That's a horrible, hopeless kind of bundle to give them to go out into the world with. And we have the ability to fill that bundle and send them out with the best bowl of porridge they ever had in their lives, instead of talking about how horrible that porridge was when we had to eat it, when it was forced on us. But I wanted to share that, and somebody else, and I don't remember which one of you, talked about when a baby is born, what it comes with. One of our teachings in our lodge is that when a baby comes, it comes with all of that spiritual knowledge. And the reason why babies and old people are together is because one is leaving the physical and the other is coming to the spiritual, or is coming from a spiritual place, and one is coming from the physical. So each one of them carries that knowledge. And in order for us outside of those two inner circles to survive and to sustain our lives, is that the exchange has to happen between those two most precious people in our community. That the old people who are going into the spiritual have to be reminded about what was there, and that the children, the babies who are coming into the physical, also have to be reminded about what was in that other world before they were there. And I can't think of anything more beautiful than that, because as we come in as babies, but we end up sitting in that elder circle. Eventually we go through each one of those those places, and that knowledge keeps growing. And if we think about children, then the way that we use words and the way that we talk to each other, we, without ever thinking, we do become kind and generous and respectful and all of those kinds of things with each other. Because that's an inherent thing that we have. And we're reminded about that. We remind each other about that, and we don't have to say, this is what we have to do. So I just wanted to talk about that, and also to say that, you know, as small children, many of us didn't have protection and nurturing. You know, residential schools took care of that, or the scoops, you know, children being taken from the communities and put into foster care or whatever, robbed us of those things. And I think it was Andrea that said, ripping our language from us, that kind of subjugation. But how that all of that automatically starts coming back when we behave in those kinds of ways. And I think about my old elders and how that was something that they impressed on us all the time. And so I want to thank you for the things that you've shared with us today, because that's so needed. And when we think of babies, how that changes the way that we sit in a circle and the way that we think of the land and each other, and how we start to think of that meadow in a different kind of way. Instead of thinking of how are we going to clear cut space, we think about those plants and all of those things in there as our children or our relatives, which is what they are. But our relatives, those plants behave the same way that we do, except that they haven't dropped their end of it, which is what we've done. You know, some of us have been forced into it, but many of us know better, and we continue to do that because of the influences from outside. So thank you, and if we can again put our minds together and think about those babies and how we're going to walk out of our doors, then let's do that. And I'll just be still for a little while and say my goodbye and my thank yous and my prayer in my mind, and you do the same thing. And then I'll close it to let you know we're finished. Kinanaskum nasaimina te petsike kat te petsike in kapet na mauya kuma mio kioge when mio big swewen at te mage matsego kit no kuma na kawi kawi kisita kuma kakan we matsegi gok e pe mio big swetek e mio asini anma mats when maski ngai sikaten kapeta chek kan we nan ka kio jo sim snanak no sim nanak mit ne quest kan we matse kinaskum na ai see.
Thank you so much, Maria, for prayers, for your comments, and your teachings. And thank you so much to our speakers, Simon, Andrea, Ray, and William. It's been overwhelmingly informative. And I think what I'm reminded as a non-Indigenous person, it's the responsibility that we also have to collaborate, to support, to participate, and contribute to achieve what is important to us as humanity and people living on the land. And I think all of you reminded us of the significance of interconnectedness of everything on the land, no matter animate or inanimate, tangible or intangible, and the intergenerational and the relativity of everything that we do. So we have a role, we have responsibilities all together. So thank you so much for that. again, I want to thank Maria, Priscilla, Ivy, Marilyn, our speakers, and Athabasca University, and also our World Heritage team for everything that you have done. It's been a pleasure to be part of this event. And I think that we can continue the conversation online or offline, because it's the whole month that we'll be talking about this. And I think it's really important that we don't look at it as a one-time off activity. We have to really work hard, and it's our responsibility, and it's time to action. So thank you again for joining us, everyone, and for your questions. I hope that you'll have a nice weekend. Take care, be well, be safe and healthy, and good evening, good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.